Hey guys, I'm Tony. Today I'm going to show you how to give your kitchen a new look by installing a new floor. Luxury vinyl tile is an upgrade from just your standard vinyl flooring. It's really easy to install, plus it's very durable. Now you can go ahead and put this in pretty much any room of your house. Just check with your manufacturer's instructions. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to measure our room length times width so we get the square footage so we know how much material to get. Now if you have something like, let's say, this island in the way, don't worry about it too much. Now we've already gone ahead and picked up our material, but when you pick up your material, you're going to want to make sure you bring it in the house, put it in the room, and let it acclimate for at least 48 hours before installing it. Now you can go ahead and install this luxury vinyl tile over an existing flooring as long as it's smooth and in relatively good condition. Our floor today has got a little bit of a texture, and as you can see, it's got some holes in it, so we're going to go ahead and remove it. To remove it, we're going to start by taking a utility knife and scribing along our cabinets, and then do the same along our baseboards. We're not going to be removing our baseboards because once our flooring is all down, we're going to go ahead and lay down a shoe mold to cover up the edges. All right, now that we've cut around the perimeter of our kitchen, we're going to go ahead and cut down the middle and start removing our vinyl. Now our vinyl, we're lucky enough where it really isn't glued down in the middle. It was only glued around the edges. So it's going to start coming up real easy. Just pull it up with your hands and a 5-in-1 tool, or you could use a pry bar. Now if you have glue underneath all the vinyl, you're going to have to cut it into smaller pieces and pry it up, and then use a scraper to get as much glue off as possible. I've cut the flooring into 3 to 4 foot pieces. You don't really want to cut them any bigger than that. They'll be too heavy to carry. And now we're going to move our appliances out of the way so we can remove the vinyl underneath. You might have to move your appliances a few times if you don't have a separate place to store them. All right, now that we have all our old flooring up, now we have to go ahead and check and make sure that our subfloor is all clean and level, free of any defects, any nail heads, any screws. We got really lucky today here with ours. You know, it's a newer house, so it really didn't have any issues. If you do have nail heads or screw heads, you want to either pull those out or drive them back down in. Either's fine as long as the floor ends up being smooth. I also want to check any seams that we have. Check them for, we just want to make sure that they're smooth. You might have to scrape them down. If they're a little bit higher, you can use a belt sander to knock them down. Our biggest issue here with ours is there's a lot of glue around the edges of our kitchen. Now we're going to scrape those down, just using a scraper. We're not going to get all the glue off, but we just want to try and get it as smooth as possible. And now we're going to fill any low spots with a cement-based leveler. This one just mixes with water. You spread it with a trowel and let it cure. We're spreading this pretty thin, so it's going to take about 30 to 60 minutes to fully cure. A level floor is important for the tile to adhere properly. Now that we've come to this door, we need to check that our clearance is enough room for our material to slide underneath it. In our case, we have more than enough room. If there's not enough room, you're going to have to cut the door down. Although over here, our side casing, there's not enough room for our flooring to get underneath it, so we're going to cut it. We don't have to worry about it too much here at our base molding because we're going to be adding a shoe molding after the project's complete. So to do this, we're going to take an actual piece of the material we're going to be putting down. This is going to give us the exact same height for when you cut it. And we're also going to use it as a guide. And to be doing this, we're going to be using this oscillating tool, which is a great tool to have to get in tight spaces. So what we're going to do is you're going to take your piece of flooring, move it up next to the side casing. Like I said, you're just going to use it as a guide and cut away. Go ahead and clean out any debris with the putty knife, and the tile should fit underneath the casing. Next, we're going to vacuum this floor of any dust and debris. This floor has to be really clean. Now back to our areas where we had that excess glue. We've scraped them down as good as possible, got as much as we could get off it, but there's still a little bit more. Now we're going to take some leveler or patch and skim it across the top of it. I'm going to take my putty knife, go ahead and run it down the edge here. You're going to add it a little liberally because you're going to skim coat it off. And then next we're going to go ahead and take our trowel and smooth it out. Now if you get any on the baseboards, just make sure you wipe it off before it dries, and then let it cure following the directions. Also, it's a good idea to use a flooring primer. Now this flooring primer is specific just for floors. It's not your usual paint primer. This primer is going to seal our subfloors, and this is going to help our tile adhere to the subfloor. Now that we've let our primer dry overnight, we're going to go and inspect our tiles. We want to make sure they're free of any defects. They haven't been damaged at all. Ours look pretty good right now, so we're going to go and get started on our layout. To get your straight starting line, mark the center of 2 opposing walls or cabinets and snap a chalk line on the floor. Do the same on the other walls or cabinets to form a cross and check that it's square. Now you're going to measure to the center of the starting wall, subtract the manufacturer's expansion gap and the width of a tile. Then mark this distance at the ends, snap a line between to get a straight line near the wall. In our case, because of the layout of our room, we're going to mark our center line in between these 2 walls. Now we can take our measurement off of this wall, come over here, measuring off that same wall, put our mark, and chalk our line for our center line. So we're going to start our first row of full tiles here in the kitchen, where the kitchen meets the living room, because this is the spot in the kitchen where our floor is going to be the most visible. Over here we have this transition strip that we have to deal with, and I've simply taken this 5-in-1 tool and lightly pried up on it just enough for this tile to slip underneath. Now this manufacturer requires an 1/8 inch gap around the perimeter of the entire room for expansion. We're dealing with an 18-inch tile here, so we want to slip a 1/4 inch underneath there. We know we have more, we'll still have that 1/8 inch gap under there for our expansion joint. So our 18 inches, we're going to mark 17 3/4 off this end of the transition strip, and then we're going to come over here, mark 17 3/4 again, snap a chalk line between these 2 marks to get your starting line. It's smart to do a dry layout to see how the tile ends up against the walls. If you have less than half a tile width at the walls, shift the layout lines a little bit. Now after we did our dry layout, we found we needed to move our center line over just a little bit, so we went and chalked a new line for that, and now we're ready to start laying the tile. And before we start laying the tile, that's one really important thing you need to know about this, is that there's arrows on the back of every tile. We need to make sure that those arrows are constantly going in the same direction throughout the entire floor installation. So with that said, we can peel off our contact paper off the back. I'm going to go a little slowly. This stuff is really sticky. And then once it's off, you want to discard it right away because the stuff builds up and it can get slippery. Now remembering which way your arrows went, you're going to take your first tile. In our case, we're sliding it underneath this transition piece, lining up our center line along with our starting line. Once it's in place, you can press it down firmly with your hands, and then you can just continue down the line. Always remembering that those arrows are going in the same direction. Once these tiles make contact with the subfloor, you really can't move them around much. All right, now we've reached a wall and it's time for us to make our first cut. Now to do this, we're gonna take the tile that we're actually gonna lay down there, and then remember, flip it over, make sure the arrows are going in the same direction, and we're just gonna place it with the paper still on it over the last tile we installed. Then we're gonna take another tile, we're gonna slide it up against the wall, and then we're gonna pull it back 1/8 of an inch, leaving that expansion gap. And we're gonna take our pencil and we're gonna draw a line down our tile that we're gonna cut. So you're gonna take your straight edge and you're gonna make a few nice light cuts. You don't have to press real hard, making sure they're straight. We're gonna go ahead, simply, they'll snap right off. You know, your perfect size piece, it'll fit right in there. Continue installing your tiles, making sure that all your seams are tight and there's no gaps. If you have to cut around a corner, mark the tile and cut. I like to use a pair of snips. You could also wear knee pads to make the installation a lot easier on your knees. Here's another way to lay the tiles. You can use spacers in between and a specially formulated grout to give it a more traditional look. All right, for our next cut, it's gonna be this angle cut. We're gonna take our square, we're gonna line it up on our seam of this tile that's already installed, and we're gonna slide it up against the wall, get our measurement here, which is 10. We're gonna transfer that measurement over here, subtracting 1/8 for our expansion gap, so 9 7/8. And we're gonna do the same thing up here, lining up on the edge here, sliding against the wall, 10 1/4, subtracting 1/8, gives us 10 1/8. Put our mark here, simply connect those two lines. Take our utility knife, scribe along that line. Dry fit it, looks pretty good. After the whole floor is completely installed, you're going to take a 100-pound roller and roll the entire floor in several directions. This will ensure a good bond between the flooring and the subfloor. Next, we're going to add some shoe molding. You're going to want to avoid mopping the floor for a few days to let the adhesive set up. Now that we got our room put back together, this place has got a whole new look thanks to luxury vinyl tile. This project took us about 2 days to do. It's a great project for pretty much any DIYer, so give it a shot. And if you want more great ideas and how-tos, go to lowes.com/howto.